Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Coach with Todd. Today, I have a wonderful interviewee. Some of you may know who she is. Welcome, Kyra Schaefer. How are you, Kyra?
Hi, Todd. I'm good. How are you?
So great. First off, I would like to say, Kyra, thank you so much for doing this interview. We are going to be talking about your book today, which
Yep.
I'm very, very excited about. But before we go into that, I need to officially introduce you with your bio. For over 20 years, Kyra has been a master practitioner of neurolinguistic programming and emotional change work therapy, teaching workshops and seminars. She is the founder and president of Schaefer Institute for Hypnosis, certifying students to become professional practitioners. Kyra is also renowned for her work in the publishing arena and is the co-founder and director of As You Wish Publishing. She's best known for featuring up-and-coming writers in collaboration book projects, winning several Amazon awards for best-selling status. You can learn more about Kyra at kyra-schaefer.com. Welcome, Kyra.
Thank you so much, Todd.
It's an honor to have you here with us today because you have a diverse background of skills and expertise. You've created multiple six-figure businesses. You've published a best-selling book on trauma, which we're going to talk about today. And you are just lovely, just lovely. Just such an amazing leader and example to so many people. It's been quite an honor to work with you and everything that you've done. So you've made a difference in a lot of people's lives. So we're excited to interview you on the first book that you have published for yourself. Like you've written it yourself, you published it yourself. It's like, wow, Kyra's written something. We better read it, right? Let's start by showing your book.
All right.
Here it is. Holograms and Echoes, Transform Triggers to Truth, Kyra Schaefer. I've read this book. I copy edited it. This is an amazing book. This is one of the best books I have read on personal transformation. Not joking. So if you haven't read it, definitely read it. It will make you better. Whether you're a practitioner or a non-practitioner, this book can provide a ton of value for you, a ton of self-awareness. This is a how-to book. This is a how-to transformational book. This is nonfiction all the way. It's a transformational tool. That is absolutely how it's set up with a lot of exercises and things. So first off, I want to congratulate you on a job well done. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You have published like 40 plus books as a publisher, and you've written and published your own contributing articles and even co-authored a book with me. But I believe this is your first solo book, right?
Yep, that's my first solo book. And I wanted to make it as easy as possible on myself. So I just wrote what I've studied for 20 years instead of being like, oh, let me learn something new, and then let me write about it. It was like, nope, I'm just going to hammer it out. It took me 40 days and 40 nights to write it. And then it was about, I think, a full 60 days, book cover design, copy editing, everything, formatting. So beginning to end, 2 months, I got this book out there on Amazon and became a bestseller right around that same time frame, about that same time frame. So we have a course out called Build Your Brilliant Book, and we make that promise. You can get your book out in 90 days. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it is possible. I wanted to see if I could do it, and I used our processes and, hammered it out. It's actually really good, very high quality too.
Yeah. Well done. And you picked a great topic that you are an absolute master expertise with. So this book was well worth the wait. It is a phenomenal read. And the Amazon reviews are incredible. If you go out to Amazon and look at what people have written about this book. So let's dive into the questions. First off, I'm going to ask the question everybody's curious about. What does the title of this book mean?
Well, I mean, that's kind of the thing, is that we have holograms and echoes from previous trauma, and everybody has experienced some level of trauma in their life, whether it was something very significant or whether it was over a long period of time. And not everybody copes with it in the same ways. So, you can have the experience of trauma and it not affect the brain whatsoever, because what happens naturally, and we've studied this with MRIs, is that the brain actually shrinks in traumatic experiences. And so the impulses and the spontaneous connections between the amygdala and the adrenal glands and all that kind of stuff, if the time frame is shortened, so we can't get to our memory and context to say everything's fine, everything's safe. So our trauma brain is actually shrunk. So our reaction time is immediate. So it sees a non-harmful stimulus as something that's life-threatening as adults. So if we experience a trauma as a child, our brain being very, moldable, it's just doesn't develop in the same way. So when we have suffered trauma as an adult, we have a little bit more of a coping mechanism, and our brain can kind of, come back from that. So we have these holograms and echoes, and holograms, there's nothing there. So one of the holograms that I had was that I had an abusive ex-fiance, and after a particularly traumatic abusive situation, I would see him standing at the back door of the sliding glass door. I would just be out of the corner of my eye, and then I would look and he wouldn't be there. So to me, that's kind of a hologram. It's nothing's happening, everything is fine, but our brain is kind of on high alert. And then after a while, that went away because my brain started to realize, no, there's nothing there. The same thing with the echoes. It's kind of like you holler into a canyon, and you get this information back, and it's similar in that same way as a hologram. It's not really there. There's nothing actually happening. And so if we can recognize that nothing's wrong, and we can kind of reduce our overstimulation and take a moment, take a breath, take 10 or 15 breaths, and exhale deeper than we inhale. And then also to help ourselves to take that step back and recognize there's nothing wrong. We have an opportunity to override the amygdala's natural responses and say, wait a minute, can we get to that context? Can we get to the memory? Can we get to the higher cortical function so that we're able to go, wait a minute, we're okay, everything's fine, and we can relax and rest and know that we're safe. Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. Great response. That is the best response I've ever heard to, what does the title of your book mean? No, seriously though.
I think people might not have gotten it, and I did put it in the introduction, the definition of those two things.
Yeah.
But it just, to me, once I got it, I was like, this is so not real. And I'm allowed to none of it is real. Like, we have traumatic responses that cause physical pain, or keep us in physical pain. And we believe that there's no way out of it. And we get the x-rays and there's nothing coming back on the x-rays. And we go to the thing and there's nothing coming back. And people aren't, and then doctors are trying to make up things like, well, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. And it's like, wait a minute, can we just take a pause and see what we're emotionally, can we connect the emotional dots here? And perhaps we can actually heal the problem. So that's why it was a little bit more in-depth explanation.
Yeah. It's a great,
may not. Yeah.
It was a great explanation. And that's what I guessed it would be. That's what I guessed it would mean in terms of holograms and echoes. It's like things that represent pains and fears that aren't really there. And that's kind of what trauma is, or what trauma response is. It's we're reacting to something that had happened, but isn't a physical danger right now. It's an overcompensation. It's a hologram. It's an echo of the past. Next question. What was your biggest inspiration for writing this book?
Um, to me, as I said in the beginning, it was like, well, what do I know really well? And what do I really like to do? And what benefits me the most? And when I write, in general, and you and I have talked about this before, when I write and do it consistently, I actually have my emotional state is actually better, even though I'm kind of writing about something that could be, traumatic or even triggering or, that kind of thing. So I was like, well, let's do a project. I'll just do a project and have fun with it and create a beginning to end scenario. Some of resulting things of my personality, of different things like that. And what I've learned by being married to you over the years, which is actually very cool. It's actually a big benefit to being married to you, has been completing things. So what I like about being married to you is that I challenge myself and I complete things more. I have a lot more follow through, and maybe it's because you're a Virgo. I don't know, but I like the feeling of that completion. And then yeah, so it wasn't like I was necessarily trying to write the great American book on trauma and trauma response. It was more, I was like, ooh, can I do that? Can I do that? And can it be beneficial? And because there's definitely a feeling in me of that don't die with your music still in you type of thing. And that's why we created As You Wish Publishing in the first place, was because we had people who were dying, it's like they had something to say.
Yeah.
And I want people to be able to say the thing that they wanted to say, and have that space to do it without it being scary or hard or, that kind
Yeah.
of thing. And we did it, over 40 books, solo books, collaboration books, hundreds of authors, all getting to tell their stories. And so, yeah, this was kind of my contribution to the world library, whether, just a handful of people read it or whether, more than that, or maybe long years down the line, it's like somebody picks it up and goes, oh, I can take control of my trauma,
Yeah.
And I know how it works instead of just going, well, I'm kind of a victim to the experience that I'm having. I'm allowed to look at it in a different way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really good stuff. You just it's like sweet nectar to my ears when I hear you talk about these things. What does make it great is that it is, it's not a traditional book with, but it does speak to your, very real credentials and your very real experience, and the fact that you've worked with thousands of people, literally one-on-one, with their emotional stuff and anxiety and trauma and stuff. So you are highly qualified to be writing a book like this. And everything that's in it is very, very good. So that's why it's so easy to promote it, because it's so vetted. It's so vetted in your experience and working with people and your expertise.
And I like the inside because I really worked hard on this. Hold on, where does it like this? like pictures?
Yeah.
There's some picture.
And not only are you extremely qualified and vetted and worked with lots of people, but there's pictures. Pictures.
There's pictures.
Yeah. You got to have fun with it too, right? Next question. What is the most surprising thing that you discovered while writing your book?
Oh, well, well, I was surprised at how fast it came out. It just kind of, I did not expect it to just flow. I also, while I was in the middle of it, and I've heard this from other authors too, is like, I never want to write another book. Like you get like your fill. You're like, I'm done. But now I'm like, ooh, what kind of thing can I create from this, and what can I do, and what would my next book be about, and I mean, like, would I do the hard science stuff? Like, I've got some hard science and soft science and a little bit of spirituality mixed in together with this, or do I want to go like full woo, like meditation and energy work, and so I was actually surprised by the fact that I was like, I don't want to do this again, and then I was equally surprised by, I think I'd like to do this again.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny.
Yeah, in my experience, personally, with public writing and publishing my own books, as well as talking to other new first-time authors, the general experience I have had is that they tend to have a lot of fear about writing the first book, and including myself for my first book, and then we get past it and we publish it, and it's like, oh, I didn't die. Yeah, nobody came after me and attacked me.
Right.
It's fine. I did it. I did it. I feel good. And then they have that much more momentum about starting the second book.
Yeah.
So I think it removes a lot of barriers to write that first book.
I think with authors, since I've done it so much, it's different for me, because I mean, recently what I did was and I'm going to do it. Well, I'll do it for this book as well, but I created a quick journal book. I painted a painting. We'll get the book today, I think. Painted a painting, and then I turned it into a journal book and then popped it up on Amazon.
Uh-huh.
Right? We can get bogged down in the perfectionistic side of things.
Oh, yeah.
But it can be just that simple. And so from my point of view, the first book that we published was Happy Thoughts Playbook. Well, you published your books prior, but not through us. And so Happy Thoughts Playbook was a collaboration book. I put everybody, that knew our friend Vicki Mitchell in there, and we published it, and it took me a year to do it. And then the following year we did, I think, published 6 books. And then the following year we did 10 books or something. And then we did a bunch of solo books. And so it was like a kind of a weird thing. Like, once you get past your first book, it's no problem. But I will say that doing my own solo book this time, it was a little bit more like, I did feel the feelings of, perfectionism. I did feel the feelings of, should I be saying that? Or, did I give enough credit in certain places? Like, Dr. Brian Sims, I took a lot of what he had done. He'd done a speech in, a few years ago, and I had taken a lot of his information. I gave him credit, obviously. So there was those elements to it that I, as a collaboration person, I don't really think about, and I just tell them the right things to do. But then doing them myself, I was like, ooh, yeah, there's a little something on that of like, will people accept this? Will I be accepted? Will what I'm saying, is it clear enough? Are people going to get it? Should I reword it? That kind of thing that I just don't do, because the authors are taking care of that on their end. Did that answer?
Yeah,
Did
yeah,
I
that's
answer
wonderful.
that question?
Yeah, that definitely answers. Yeah, those are some surprising things to have discovered by while writing the book.
Mm-hmm.
You've already spoken a lot about it. Is there anything else you want to tell us about the book's content itself?
I think it's really the book is really connects the dots for people, and this is what I've been hearing from people who don't know me very well, who have read the book. Yeah. It's like, if you have your review team, they're going to give you good reviews, they're going to give you good input, and they're going to be very kind. But when you have somebody who doesn't know you very well and they read the book and they're giving you feedback like, oh my gosh, it's exactly what happened to me, or that is exactly how I have felt, and I feel like you're speaking my language, like you get me. And I don't feel like any psychologist has ever gotten me, because they've never experienced anxiety. They never went through any kind of trauma. They read about it in a book, and they've talked to people who have had it, but they've never really felt that uncontrollable feeling, where they just feel like they're completely outside of their mind and they
Yeah.
can't get any footing and it feels like they're drowning. And it's that to me is such a huge compliment because, you know, and that's what happened a lot in our practice was just that, you know, I'm seen. I'm finally seen because someone can practice seeing another person in a situation, but not having ever experienced it, it makes it a lot more difficult to feel seen by that person. And like, I wouldn't suggest, oh, somebody broke their leg. Now you need to go break your leg so that you can really understand what it feels like to break your leg to be an effective therapist. Not by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying from my point of view, having suffered with anxiety and the other side of it, which is depression, to my clients just have always felt seen. And so writing a book from that perspective is really, I find, very helpful and helpful for the people that have talked to me about it as well.
Yeah. I think one of the reasons that makes you speaks to the success that you've had is that you have the expertise and the relatability, right? And you've put yourself out there a lot. If you were in a very, very traditional role, it might be hard to be as relatable as you've been able to be by taking a little bit more of a non-traditional approach, in terms of being a holistic practitioner. You have more latitude, you have more flexibility to kind of be you and do it your way and set up your business the way you want to. You don't have licensures to worry about. You weren't pigeonholed by an overly traditional approach,
Right. I didn't have to get CEUs. I didn't have to do
right.
all of that.
You didn't have to cater to
or
the
say I
system.
can't practice in such and such place or such and such
Right.
time and I trusted myself enough to know what I can and can't do. And so if somebody came to me with schizophrenia, I'm not going to know how to treat that. And I could help them relax, I can help them find peace, but I can't help them necessarily. I can maybe help them accept themselves the way that they are, but ultimately I'm not qualified. So knowing what I'm not qualified for is a key.
Well, yeah,
too, as
staying
well.
in your, I mean, you got to stay in your lane, otherwise
Right. Yeah.
it's not going to work long term. But yeah, it's really, really, you've made such an amazing impact, I think, because of your relatability and your expertise and marrying them together. And that is what comes through so strongly in your book. Is someone could go read a ultra academic book on trauma and learn a bunch of stuff, but that doesn't mean they're going to be able to relate to the material or the person writing it like you have. And I can speak from my experience because I've been in the trenches with you, as we've seen all those clients, that relatability is an important thing, and staying in your lane, of course, and teaching on the things that they say the wound is the initiation, right? So if we have been through the wound ourselves, which you speak to thoroughly and eloquently, that absolutely helps to vet our experience and our expertise, especially when we build those credentials on top of it. So the fact that you have embraced yourself so completely, and have taken radical responsibility with your personal development over the course since I've known you, so a lot of years, that's really self-evident in a book like this, to see how many people you've seen, how intimately familiar you are with the topic of trauma and how effective it is and how relatable it is. It's just so good. So in other words, I'm just saying, it's no surprise whatsoever that people are saying, man, this is a relatable book.
I will say there's a great book out there called The Body Keeps a Score by Bessel van der Kolk. And it's phenomenal. I'd love to relay a story from that book, but we can also just continue with the questions. But I didn't add it to mine, but it really speaks to what trauma is, and how to let ourselves off the hook for a lot of the experiences that we've had and maybe kept ourselves in. It's phenomenal. Just know that when you read trauma books, that you could become traumatized. Like you might open up a little bit of trauma, you might get triggered. As a matter of fact, like when I was listening to my own book again, because I put it through a program, and because I hear things better than sometimes when I'm reading them, I skip over a lot. And and I was like, oh God, I'm getting triggered. So and also too, one of my beautiful readers also said, hey, I got to take my time with this. I have to digest it, because things are coming up for me. So it's okay for things to come up for you with this book. And I even say in there in various places, hey, go work with someone, work with a coach, work with your counselor if things come up, because that's part of the purpose of this kind of thing. So, but anyway, in The Body Keeps a Score, there's this one in particular that I just love this study. They had dogs in cages, and they did where there was dogs in one cage, and they were shocked every day. And then they had another kind of a control group where the dogs were not shocked at all. And so they would open the cage, and the dogs would be shaking, in the I guess zap cage. They would be shaking. They would defecate. They would do this whole thing. And you would open the cage, and they would actually not leave. They wouldn't leave the cage. Whereas in the control group, those dogs, they weren't getting shocked, and they shocked them before they let them out of the cage, and they ran immediately out of the cage. And so this speaks to children who will defend their parent, even though their parent has been cruel or abusive or that kind of thing, or teachers, things like that, where if they've had this consistent abuse over a long period of time, that they are traumatized, they're in a lot of pain, but there's that function that will not let them leave. They don't know what's out there. And especially with children, one of the things that not only you pointed out, but another one of my readers pointed out too, was a child doesn't know that parent isn't going to kill them, if they step out of line, or they don't do that thing right, if they've been abused by them. Even if it's a spanking, it doesn't have to be, we can have trauma brain from emotional abuse, not just physical abuse. And trauma brain means that those reactions are shrunk, and those immediate adrenaline responses come up. So what that does for me, or what that said for me, was that in my life, when I've defended certain situations that were abusive or bad for me, that it was just that fear of getting zapped again, and not knowing that the outcome could be more serious than the zap, and or that the outcome of leaving the situation could be more serious. And that played itself out in my relationship with my ex, because he was abusive to me way before we even got to the point where it was very violent and potentially life-threatening. But he had done that prior to those experiences, and I just stayed in that situation because I had been taught, as a dog being zapped in a cage, that if I leave, it could be worse. And so for me, the spiritual connotation was that I needed that big giant push to say absolutely fuck no, no more. And then once I got that big giant push, then I was like, I'm a dog out of the cage. I'm never going back in a cage. Nobody can put me back in a cage. This is never happening again. There is no cage. I am not dead. I am moving on, with my life and my experience, and I get to trust that Holy Spirit has got my back, so it's kind of an unfolding process with people who experience trauma, especially at an early age.
I'm going to dovetail into that and say that what stood out to me most about this book is that it's not just for people who identify with having experienced trauma.
Yeah.
Everyone has experienced trauma, sometimes major trauma, but we all have a million micro traumas that we have accumulated in life, and the effect upon us varies quite a bit. In fact, some people, you were alluding to this, sometimes people aren't even aware of how trauma has affected them and could be limiting them. We don't know why we're reacting the way that we're reacting. So the brain is doing its job to protect us, regardless of how much awareness we have over things, traumas, major or minor, that we've accumulated throughout our whole life, right?
Yeah.
So it's like we don't even have the awareness to put our finger on the exact things a lot of times, because there are a million micro traumas that we've accumulated that have created our conditioning.
That's right. Yeah.
So can you comment on how the book can benefit anyone who has experienced major or micro trauma?
There's a number of exercises inside the book that will actually help you to get out of an immediate trauma response. I mean, there's simple things that can be done. There's long-term things that can be done as well. It's also finding the areas, it asks you to find the areas where you got your top 10 things that are bugging you right now, the things that are, the things that naturally cause you to go into a trauma or a triggered spiral. Learning about what those things were, because for me, my anxiety started at a young age. So I didn't know, you don't know what you don't know, and you kind of learn as you go. And so if I'd have had this understanding back then, I think it would have been way easier. But as I look back, I realized that I set things up in place to help me to unhook from potentially triggering things. Because I think that we do that too. We will create scenarios to keep us from feeling our anxiety, because we unconsciously know what those triggers are. Yep. So, like, for example, somebody who is agoraphobic, it's basically their radius is just shrunk down into their comfort zone. And so that right. Comfort zone, so it's important to break out of those things, but it takes time, and it takes, connection. It takes talking about it, talking through it. But what this book does is it helps you to find out what are those things that get you going, so that you can break them down before you get into the scenario. And for me as a kid, I didn't realize that I was doing this, but every day at around the same time, which is about 2:00 or so, I would have an anxiety attack at school, usually, because it was actually safer for me to have an anxiety attack at school, interestingly enough. And so what was interesting, was that when I hit, I think, 11th grade, I started going to a tech center to do mass communications and computer information systems. So you could go there for cosmetology, you could go there for mechanic work, you could go there for lots of different skills and trades. Well, one of them was this particular one. And on the bus ride there, I would take a nap. So I'd take a nap at about 1:00 every day, and it would help me to reset my brain. And I would breathe, I would do a lot of different things, but not because anybody taught me to do it. It was because I had this pattern interrupt where my day completely shifted. And so everything improved. My grades improved, my mindset improved. I stopped having as many panic attacks every day. And so without consciously understanding what was happening, it's almost like, my own guardian angel kind of came in and said, "Ooh, don't you think that would be an interesting thing to do? Don't you want to not take Spanish and advanced calculus? Why don't you go to a tech school?" And it's so interesting how that kind of plays out and happens for us. And so without knowing it, I was already on that self-healing path. And I think this book helps to do that. It just helps you to know, hey, there are some things that I can do medication free, without necessarily needing to go anywhere or do anything or spend thousands and thousands of dollars. there are some things where I can just kind of get present with my process in being triggered and having anxiety, and recognize that as a core process, instead of let's go to have somebody else kind of figure this out for me. Does that make sense?
Yes, it's really impressive how you intuitively found your ways to manage it and cope with it and self-soothe, and before you even knew what these modalities were, you kind of found your
No
way
idea.
because you had such an intimate experience. You were in it all the time. You had a lot of experience with it. So you're going to learn things just from having that many hours of exposure, right? You're put in your 10,000 hours kind of thing, right?
Yes.
So you had so much of that in your life before even finding out that, oh, there's modalities for hypnotherapy and things like that,
Oh yeah. Like when I got to energy work and Reiki, and understanding that I had that ability to rebalance and recalibrate myself, and have loving people in my life that I, didn't know that, my Reiki practitioner, my teacher, eventually would be my teacher. She was just such a loving person. She had her own struggles, we all do. But she was so loving, so kind, so what I wanted to be, when you just lovingly connect with another person, that I was like, wow, I mean, incredible feeling of love that I just never really got before. So is that unconditional positive regard that we have for our clients. And what we give to people. And there's in the book, there is I think it's chapter 7, and it is called something, let's see, but I talk about how my friend Liz Dawn is just spent a little time with me, and said, hey, you're having these feelings right now. It was resolving childhood trauma. And she said, how old were you first felt that feeling that you're feeling right now? And then we just did a little quick connecting around how old I was and what it really meant, and that I was safe now and I was loved now, because we get into that regressed place, and we have a hard time getting out of it ourselves. So having that loving partner is incredibly beneficial when we're going through some trauma triggered response as well.
Yeah, I grew up with a lot of anxiety in my childhood as well, and I learned over time the water I was swimming in. But you don't know for a lot of years. What type of effect your circumstances or conditioning are having upon you emotionally, especially since you can't jump into anybody else's body and anybody else's experience. So not only do you have your own experience, but yeah, we really don't know until we dive into ourselves, or until we start to see the fruits of certain experiences into adulthood, and be like, man, that's really affecting me, or something is still really affecting me. And sometimes we address it if it's debilitating, or we'll ignore it if it's minor kind of thing. But having had as much experience as you've had with it, and myself as well, you've learned a lot about how to self-soothe at an early age and how to navigate those things intuitively. I didn't take the exact path you did, but I also had to find my own coping mechanisms for anxiety at a young age and things like that. And it definitely had an impact in terms of wanting to go inward and wanting to understand how things work internally, right? And that's produced an entire journey of incredible experiences. So it's a lot of fruits, a lot of fun, a lot of fruit. We are having a fibrous conversation because of all the fruit, So, yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's really, really good. So if you're thinking about getting a trauma book and you've got a whole bunch of them in your hands, just buy this one, okay? Just just this one, or read this one first. And no, obviously, please read anything you're attracted to,
Yeah.
because it's appropriate for your path. This is obviously an amazing book, highly
Yeah.
relatable, and it has expertise, the expertise and the relatability, and those two things together, I think, make a great book. If you're writing a book. So let's segue in our last few questions into writing a great book. So, Kyra, what advice would you give to new writers, a new writer or someone who's just starting out, maybe thinking about or in the process of writing their first book?
Just outline it, like take your big ideas and, have a central theme, because what might happen, so when you start to brainstorm your book, you might have a lot of different things that kind of come out. And so what I did was I did the mind map, theme in the middle. I was like triggered responses, from transforming triggers, that kind of thing. And then out from that, I branched the different ideas, just everything in my head around triggers and trauma. And, from my own stories to, having experiences with clients to, all different stuff. And I just put it all out there. And then I just stepped back from it, because we have this giant whiteboard in our home. And it's just super cool. I mean, right, Todd? Like, it is
Yeah,
super
we got
cool.
a
Like
big whiteboard.
yeah, and so it's in our dining room. So our dining room
Yeah,
isn't fancy. I do my artwork in there, and I do, and we have this whiteboard. It's our creativity section, I think. And so anyway, got it. And then I just stepped back and I let it just kind of wash over me. And then I pull out and circle the things that could potentially be chapters. And then I write out the just, outline, you could be step 10, and then you
yeah,
reverse engineer and go backwards. Like, where do you want them to be? And then go backwards from that. Or having kind of the big thing. So kind of how I did it was I wanted to have there to be a lot of exercises. I didn't want a whole lot of memoir stuff, but I wanted to have that relatability piece, so people would see that they're being seen in it. And
yeah,
also, too, my story does matter because it informs why I learned what I learned and why it worked for me, and why, some things may not have worked as effectively. And so I wrote out the outline of it, because things changed. Like, I put in my outline in my manuscript, and I did, chapter 1, this title, chapter 2, so
yeah,
on. And then I would put subheadings in there. And then I would start writing something, and I'm like, oh, this is crap. Like, what am I saying? What am I trying to say? It's not coming across. So then I would go back to the whiteboard and I go, oh, you know what? I actually meant to say this and not this. And so I would go
yeah,
back, or I would find there's a whole nother book, kind of
yeah.
nestled
Oh,
inside,
yeah, for sure.
and it's like, oh crap, I can't even begin to hit that one without opening this massive can of worms that I can't close back, because I'm not writing a 400-page book, right? And
Right.
so I was just like, okay, here we go. So I then just took the main big bites that I really wanted to convey, and then went from there. But yeah, there was definitely moments, and I went to, because I need to be as uncomfortable as possible when I write, to a certain degree, because otherwise I'll get distracted. So I'll go to what's it called, the Panera. And what was interesting, that while I was at the Panera, I actually got triggered. And then I wrote about being at Panera getting triggered. So sometimes you could be out and about and not realize that you've got this content just flying at you, and listening to people's conversations. Oh, there is a world of information in just overhearing people and their stuff. So it's finding that creative place where you can go, But if I'm uncomfortable in a chair for 2 hours, and I pick the most uncomfortable chair at Panera, I get a lot more done. And so then I fly through my content. So there's kind of some tips, I guess.
Wonderful tips. Yeah. And I'll add on there when I write books, starting having an outline and a general thing for your, like, say 10 chapters. So really makes for a nicer book in terms of your writing, just because it starts out more organized and you're less likely to trail off down into directions and that you don't want to be going down, and keeps your writing on topic, essentially.
Yeah.
So that you're not repeating yourself, so I mean, outline is so crucial. I mean, even if you have no writing experience whatsoever, an outline, a general outline to follow with, like, say 10 overarching chapters is going to make your book twice as good right off the bat in terms of the writing quality. And then what I do is I'll get in there and I'll just start writing about any topic that maybe I've written down, and start expanding. It's kind of like putting a puzzle together. It's like you start with the framework, and then you look for little pieces that go together, and you kind of start, and you have little clusters.
Yep.
And then you fill them in. You don't have to write a book from top to bottom.
I've seen this. I was watching 2 shows now where I saw this, and it's the same kind of BS where they type, oh, you're going to write a book, and they type chapter 1, and then they backspace, and then just type the number 1, and then they backspace and capitalize it and do chapter ONE. And I'm like, stop it. Don't write a book like that. Write it where you feel the most drawn, because what they were doing was they were getting paralyzed by, couldn't even write the first sentence because they aren't, they're trying to find something from nothing, from the blank page. Stop that. You throw paint on the page first, like watercolors. Like when you paint a watercolor picture, you splotch watercolor and different pigment on the paper before you even do anything, and then you find out what it might be. But that's what that mind map is. It's just, you're putting paint on the page and you're saying, this is what I might want to do, and then you let it unfold. But if you have no ideas and you're trying to just write chapter 1, it will not happen. I think I started with chapter 4.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, yeah, you could do it that way, but then you might be forcing yourself to do something that is counterintuitive to the thing that you're trying to do. I mean, I totally get the start here and end here approach, and then just kind of force yourself to do that. And for some people that may work. And having a light outline or structure helps, like I said before, but finding that flow is the most important thing. I mean, you want to get into the point to where, I'm sure there's a lot of terms that this is called, but we'll just call it the flow. You want to find any idea or any piece of content that you feel like you have something to say about right now, and you want to expand and expound upon, and just, letting the words come to you, and then it sprawls out because you get into that state, that psychological state where you're essentially, it's like doing artwork. You get into a flow, or heck, it could be a flow working under a Jeep,
Absolutely. Cooking is also a flow.
Cooking is great. It's a creative flow. So no matter what that looks like for a writer, allow yourself to do that. It's going to be way easier to write if you allow yourself to find anything that helps you kind of tap into what you want to do. I usually don't write the introduction of my book or even officially title it to the very end sometimes, because the book may become something a little bit different than what you planned. And, you want to you want to speak to what it is, not what you thought it was going to be, and then
what you thought it was going to be. Yes, because that happens too. I'll begin a chapter, and then by the end of it, I'm like, that's not what that chapter was. I don't know what that chapter was.
Right. Did we talk about any? Do you have any ideas in terms of what some common traps might be for aspiring writers?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think that perfectionism trap is a big one.
Yeah,
It's like, oh, if I don't do this exactly right, everybody's gonna hate me. Like I think that I mean I've not hate, but disagree or think I'm wrong, or or the other one is it's already been said, it's already been done, but
yeah,
it hasn't been said or done by you. So it's a whole different, you have a whole different spin on your experience, because that's really the truth.
yeah,
Not continuing, like, it's like, okay, I'm gonna write my book now, and then you write for a minute and then you stop. So not having consistency, not having a goal,
yeah,
is a big pitfall. um and then
yeah,
also to really taking into consideration who is going to be reading this.
yeah,
It's like you can write a book for you, or you can write a book for somebody else.
yeah. Good
There.
points. Good points. Yeah,
Yeah, and you can also yeah, make sure that for a nonfiction book, I think there should be exercises, journal prompts, stuff like that to help connect people to the material.
good points. Yeah, it's interesting how the first time when you publish your first book, it has a tendency to bring up whatever issues you have, especially regarding acceptance or fear of loss of approval, things like that. Especially for the NFs out there, for sure. It does, it kind of squeezes our issues to the surface. But then once that trauma brain, or just our brain, once our brain sees that I published a book, nobody killed me, then there really is a part of our survival mind with anything new that we do that stops us from doing it. And we get coached on taking steps through our fear and realizing that we are safe, which is why you should work with a coach. And and then we have that experience and oh look, it was fine. Look how free I feel now. I feel so free to write another book, right?
Yeah.
uh,
That
Express me.
accomplishment alone, I mean, people, when people submit a chapter, I mean, I've walked through this with so many authors, people who are submitting 1,000-word chapter to a 4,000-word chapter. It's all the same to a certain degree, because they're to writing their own solo books. It's a little scary, and it can be a little nerve-wracking, and that wanting to be loved and accepted, and really truly just want to be help to whomever is reading it, as well, and then just saying, hey, I did it, I had the courage to put this on paper. But people think that once they put something on paper, they're not allowed to change their mind. They're not allowed to come back later and say, you know what, I said that, but you know what, I've grown, I've learned, I've developed, and this is what I'm saying now. And I think people need to give themselves that freedom to say, yeah, sure did, like, yep, I know I voted that way at one time, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to change my mind in the future. Or, oh yeah, me and this person were in a bad situation at one time, but that doesn't mean that I can't forgive them. I can't turn around and see what kind of learning experience I had from that. Because I also warn authors of just dragging somebody through the mud in their articles or their books, because we don't know what you're going to feel like tomorrow. So I always recommend people saying, I have this conflict with this person, but I'm still learning, I'm still developing, I'm still understanding it better. Instead of going, this person did something horrible to me and they're just so bad and so wrong, and I'll never forgive them. Staying away from that kind of stuff too.
On a similar note, what do you when someone writes a memoir, it's usually one of the last books that they write, or later books in their career, to reflect on their experiences and things like that, especially if they're a celebrity, where the public may have interest in a memoir of that sort,
Sure.
but we have seen a lot of first-time authors write memoirs. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think that it's the writing what and it's easy to write from our point of view instead of trying to learn something new and then relay the information, or having learned something new and then even over many years, and then you relaying it without having that personal touch in there. So I think it's because we find it the safest to write what we know, and we also know that those are the books that are probably going to be read by our immediate family first. So as a first-time author, your biggest support, your team, is going to be your friends and your family. And so a lot of people like to honor their friends and their family in their memoirs. And in our chapter books, in our collaboration books, there have been a lot of memoirs in those. And a lot of it is about, many of them have been around honoring my mother or father who's passed away, honoring myself through the process of grieving. We've seen that a lot too. So yeah, I think it's just people writing what they know.
I've also, as a publisher, I've also experienced it to where it's cathartic for them to write about their experiences in a memoir. And there's something that they get out of putting it out there in a very public way, publishing it. It's like, it's cathartic as writing down and allowing yourself to process those experiences. But then there's something doubly cathartic about putting it out there in a really big way, I think.
Yeah. It's saying it's set in stone. It's forever.
Forever.
People feel that because forever. Because books are
timeless.
The double-edged sword of that is I'm not allowed to ever change my mind because it's written in a book. Not true. Not true at all. We see how books develop over the years, right? That's why we have multiple editions to, college books and stuff like that, because new information comes out, new insights, new understandings. And yeah, but it is incredibly cathartic for people to do this, and that it's not going to go away when they die. It'll be on the bookshelves, or it'll be in Amazon, forever. If Amazon stays around forever, right? Or it's on the bookshelves of your loved ones. And that's why I think that way they have a legacy.
Yeah. I think it can be very, very inspiring to the immediate circles of the first-time authors to be like, whoa, she wrote a book.
Yeah. And like Karen Gabler and Sarah Gabler. We have authors, and multiple times this has happened where we have the moms and daughters will write a chapter, an individual chapter. Sometimes they combine it in our collaboration books. And that to me is really nice because, like Karen and Sarah have got like 10 or 11 books under their belt now that they've got a whole library of where they wrote together. And I think that's cool. Just so incredibly special. My mother wrote so cute. She wrote me basically an outline, and then she told me the story because she's a storyteller, but she's not really a writer. So she wrote an outline of it and then told me the story, told me what she wanted to say. And then I was kind of her ghostwriter. And because I experienced it with her. And I was moved by it too. So I knew all the movements and the flow of what she was wanting to convey. And so that's special to have that. That was in our first Happy Thoughts playbook, to be able to do that with her. So I think, when we look at it as from a relational point of view, we are connecting the dots on so many different levels psychologically. You think, well, it's just a book. No, there's so much more to it than that. And it's really actually very empowering and very beautiful. And it's such a unique process that not everybody gets to experience, or just don't know that it's available to them.
So two more questions.
Yeah.
how can writing and publishing a book help a holistic practitioner's business?
Oh yeah. Like that is like credibility, expert status. Like you got the cred, you got the street cred. Maybe you work with a couple hundred clients or something like that, or you have your business or you're building your clientele. But if you want to speak in front of people, if you want to get your name out there, writing that book takes you to expert status, or writing in a book, because what that's doing is that it's helping people, because we still have that mentality, even though it's not necessarily true, right? We still have that it's written in stone. They believe so much in what they're saying that they're willing to write it down in a book that'll be here forever, right? You can still change your mind though, but when people, the perception of it is, I don't have enough courage to do that. I don't have enough courage to step on the stage. I don't have enough courage to write it in that book. So they do. So that must mean XYZ. They know what they're doing. They know what they're talking about. And the thing that I think we've been the most blessed with is that we have had authors that have written for our collaboration books who do know what they're talking about, like Beth Eiglarsh and, Janet Zavala. I mean, like, Gigi Rush. Like we have people who get it, who know what they're talking about. Karen, of course, Sarah, who's this young lady who gets it, And so when you are working on your book, or you're doing a chapter, or you're doing whatever, just amplifies, just takes you to a whole nother level.
And it is it's a massive credibility builder to have a book in it, even if it whether it has to do with your practice or not. You're still a published author. If you can write it about what you do, then it makes it even more applicable, and your clients just need to know that they can trust you and that you're real. And the more you can show them that you're legit, you're not only doing it as a hobby, or you're working towards becoming more of a professional at your craft, then awesome. The more it's going to help. I mean, we want to take those highly leveraged activities that are going to legitimize ourselves as business owners.
Yeah, and then you add it to your website, and you can also get some income from it, all kinds of stuff. Like there's so much.
Anytime you're traveling or speaking or at an expo or anything, you've got books that you can hand out to people for free, or for cheap, or whatever you want. And I mean, that can substitute as a sales conversation. Here's my book, and then it's got they have their about you, they have all your contact info. The book is a business card on steroids.
Yeah, right. It really is. And the way we do it, it's so cool. But it's really inspiring and wonderful when people just take that leap and say, of course I've got this. Of course I know this stuff. It doesn't make it, a little less, scary at times. That's just normal. That's just normal, a part of the process. But, writing your book is the best calling card that you can have, for sure.
And finally, are you working on anything at present, whether it's writing something or just doing something else? What are you up to now that you'd like to share with people?
Well, right this minute, it just changes so much from day to day for me, because I don't know, it's just one of those things. I've been lucky in business and in love, to be able to have flexibility, to discover the kinds of things that I like and what I want to do. So yesterday I had this inspiration to create just the journal, inside gut journals, for authors, whether they've been solo authors with us, or they've been collaborative authors with us, or those people who haven't worked with us in the past at all, but to actually take their quotes, they can take their journal prompts, things like that, turn it into PDF, around 200 pages or so, and just give them the gut. So it's already trimmed, already ready to go if they want to turn it into a book. Because that to me is really cool, because you can give that as something as well. You can have it as a companion to your collaboration books. You can have it as something that you offer to your clients, something quick and easy that you can say, hey, listen, I've got a journal prompt for you every day that I want you to work on, and then we'll go through them next week and talk about them. I actually wrote this. I created this book. I went on a little bit of a spree of creation, where I created 6 books in 6 days, and I published six books in 6 days. And this was one of them, and it's called The Best Advice I Can Give, a wisdom journal from parents to their kids. Because so I just made little questions for people to be able to write and give it to their kids when they go off to college, because, or whatever they might be doing. One question: why you matter so much to me? Like, we don't generally naturally say that to kids, or we don't naturally say that to each other. But then they have it written down, and it becomes very special. How to handle a friend conflict, what I wish my parents told me, so you can create any journal prompts you want. You can do it based off your book. And so, and we did it with your SETS book, Selling Emotionally Transformative Services. Turn your quotes into prompts and put that into a journal. So that's what I'm kind of playing with right now.
Awesome. That's very, very cool. Can you tell us about your new website, what you're offering there?
Sure. Well, I mean, I'm still working it out. I mean, we have had multiple businesses, like Todd said, multiple 6-figure businesses, companies. We have now made it into a conglomeration of TK Schaefer Enterprises, to be able to do whatever we want, because we can get moved and inspired at any given time for doing any given thing. Having that ability to be publishers, to create summits, for practitioners, because that was really kind of the purpose, because we wanted to help people build their credibility. And because I remember being in the early stages and people were like, well, do you have a name? And I'm like, yes, my name is Kyra. And it's like, no, it wasn't because we didn't hear what you said. It was because you don't have any credibility, So we wanted to create that opportunity. And then with our own practice, like Todd's a coach, I've been kicking around the idea of doing more around trauma triggers, and stress responses, and helping clients with those. And so when you go to my website right now, I haven't fully thought it all through. Obviously, I'm doing speaking engagements, and also to kind of creating like mini packages where you'll probably get a video that, has something to do with whatever the topic is. Like, I can't even, just like our boundaries, dealing with boundaries. There's a package on overwhelm and stress responses. I'm going to do one on meditation, that kind of thing. So I'm just wanting to be a little bit creative with the site and offer a lot of different types of things.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your expertise with us, and for sharing about all the trauma stuff and about the tips for writers, and having, been a publisher. Very, very valuable information. If you would like to contact Kyra, she can be reached at www.kyra-schaefer.com. And if you'd like to work with me, I can do a lot of different stuff, including writing coach, personal development, life coach, business coach. If you'd like to work with me, I do offer a free 30-minute intake and an introductory 1-hour session for $20. Low risk.
Smoking deal.
Smoking hot, man. Smoking hot. And I'm gonna say the same thing I say to everybody I interview. We come from all over the world. I wish that I could just reach the screen and give you a hug, because wait a minute. You're here. I can just walk into the other room and give you a hug. So if you'll excuse me, everyone, we're going to end this interview so I can do that. And thanks, everybody. This has been so great, great, great. Fantastic info. Kyra is the best. Be sure to check out her book, check out her website, or contact me if you feel led. Thank you so much, Kyra. This has been awesome. Appreciate it.
I love you.
Love you too. And we will see you all next time. Bye-bye.